Trump's lawyer is now being investigated. This is the latest news. President Trump's lawyer is, of course, Michael Cohen. You will remember Michael Cohen from such stellar TV performances as What Polls and also Confused Look on TV. Michael Cohen is not the world's best lawyer. Okay, President Trump's been using him for a long time. When we say that he's Trump's personal lawyer, what that really means is that he has been involved for a long time in being sort of Trump's bagman to a certain extent. He's his fixer. He's a self-described fixer. And so, in fact, Michael Cohen has compared himself to Trump's Tom Hagen. Tom Hagen, of course, being the character from the Godfather movies, who is the personal lawyer for the Corleone family. Now, one of the problems here is that Michael Cohen is not supremely competent. And the other problem is that Michael Cohen has been cleaning up Trump's messes for so long that he may have gotten a little bit casual about it. So here is the story. The FBI apparently raided Michael Cohen's office yesterday. And the raid included documents that were regarding Cohen's self-stated $130,000 payment to Trump one-night stand Stormy Daniels. So now we have a real scandal brewing over Stormy Daniels. So what exactly happened here? Well, back in 2006, as you'll recall, President Trump allegedly stripped Stormy Daniels. That is probable. I cannot imagine that is not true. It is really unlikely that Trump did not strip Stormy Daniels, given all the surrounding available evidence and Trump's record with women and all the rest of it. Okay, fine. So that's who Trump is. If people had known about that, nobody would have cared because Trump has stripped everything from here to Miami. I mean, that is really not a giant shock in any significant way. But for some odd reason, about 10 days before the election, it looked like Stormy Daniels was going to talk to the press, and Trump's team, or at least Michael Cohen, was afraid that Trump would somehow be implicated and people would not like Trump if they found out that Trump was having an affair, which, by the way, is an insane thought. No one was going to shift their vote based on Trump having an affair with a porn star 10 years prior. Everyone had assumed, I think, that Trump had been doing that sort of thing all the time. Anyway, Cohen signed a $130,000 check to Stormy Daniels to shut her up, and they signed a settlement agreement. And the settlement agreement was run through an LLC, and that settlement agreement used a bunch of pseudonyms. So there's a pseudonym for Stormy Daniels, there's a pseudonym for President Trump, and this document was signed. Stormy Daniels, of course, is now complaining, and she's saying that the document wasn't actually formalized and that it's not actually binding. But in any case, Michael Cohen is fighting that in court and suggesting that it is binding and that Stormy Daniels is supposed to shut up about all the details of her affair with Trump, or he will sue her. In any case, what exactly went wrong here? Well, according to the Washington Post, Cohen is under federal investigation for possible bank fraud, wire fraud, and campaign finance violations, according to 3 people with knowledge of the case. So the story here is that $130,000 that Cohen paid to Stormy Daniels, he has claimed that Trump had no knowledge of it, which means that this could be a campaign finance problem. Right? It could be an in-kind contribution. The sort of precedent for this being an in-kind contribution would be the John Edwards case. You remember John Edwards? John Edwards was the vice presidential candidate with John Kerry, and then he was a front runner for a short period of time in the 2008 presidential election. Well, in the middle of that presidential election, it was about to come out that John Edwards had an affair while he was married to his cancer-ridden wife, and he was having this affair with a woman named Rielle Hunter, and he impregnated her with a baby. And he had all of his donors get together and give Rielle Hunter about $1 million to shut up for the duration of the election cycle. This constituted campaign finance violation and in-kind contribution by his people, and John Edwards actually went to trial. He was tried on 6 counts, including conspiracy to violate campaign finance laws. He was acquitted on one of those counts. The jury hung on the other 5 counts. And in the end, the DOJ dropped the case. This case is very, very similar. This looks like what the DOJ is after here, and what the lawyers are after, what the prosecutors are after, is the possibility that Michael Cohen was instructed by President Trump to pay Stormy Daniels, and that this constituted an in-kind contribution, that Trump conspired with Michael Cohen to evade campaign finance laws by allowing this in-kind contribution to his campaign from Michael Cohen, which was then not reported to the FEC. Right? That's the entire crux of the matter here. So this comes out late yesterday. That Trump's attorney his offices have now been raided by the FBI. And President Trump responds with the kind of language that we've become accustomed to hearing from President Trump. He's very passionate about this. He's very upset about this. And he says some things that I think are true and some things that I think are exaggerated. Here was President Trump's response.
And it's a disgrace. It's frankly a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense.
Okay, so he says it's an attack on our country. That sort of language I don't appreciate from the president, given the fact that there are actually attacks on our country that take place on a pretty regular basis. It is not, in fact, an attack on the United States if the president of the United States does something wrong and then is then investigated for it. It is an attack, perhaps, on the presidency, or an attack on Trump himself. And this is where we get into some really dicey territory, because the real question here is, what basis did the FBI really have to go after Trump's personal attorney? It is unprecedented. Okay, it is unprecedented. There is such a thing as attorney-client privilege. If I'm somebody's attorney, I'm a lawyer. If I'm somebody's lawyer and we are corresponding about a particular issue that does not involve me as the lawyer helping the client break the law, then all of that is privileged material. And it's very difficult to overcome that presumption of privilege for law enforcement. Law enforcement actually has to jump through a bunch of hoops in order to seize documents from a lawyer's office. They have to jump through a lot of hoops because we don't actually want the government jumping in and looking at everything a lawyer says to their client. That'd be insane. If the government could do that, then they could presumably win every case. They could disbar lawyers on a regular basis. They could go after clients for saying things that aren't even legally challengeable in certain sense because they're just running through case theory, for example. The reason attorney-client privilege exists is because there has to be a level of confidentiality between a lawyer and a client, just like there's a level of confidentiality between doctors and patients. So you have to overcome a serious presumption here. So Trump is saying this is an attack on him. It may very well be, but we're not going to know that until we find out what exactly the FBI was looking for. At this point, we still don't know exactly what the FBI was looking for. So when Trump says it's an attack on the country, I don't think Trump is the country, but it certainly is an attack on President Trump. And it may well be an unfair attack on President Trump, as I'll discuss in just a moment. Now, President Trump also is very angry at his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, because, again, the way this worked is apparently the Mueller investigation referred out the information that led to the warrant to the U.S. District of the Southern District of New York. So this investigation that ended with the raid on Michael Cohen's offices actually had very little to do in the end with the Mueller investigation. It was tossed off to the U.S. District Attorney in the Southern District of New York. So this is a second investigation, right? This is a second investigation that we are talking about right now. And Trump is saying, well, if Jeff Sessions were really my wingman, he would have stopped all of this. If Jeff Sessions really cared what happened to me, he never would have recused himself in the first place. He would have done exactly what Eric Holder did, and would have stopped any investigation into my administration. And Trump isn't exactly wrong about this. The fact is that Eric Holder did play that role for Barack Obama. Now, should Jeff Sessions play that role? Well, not in terms of being an honest attorney general. Eric Holder was a corrupt attorney general. I'm old enough to remember when we all said that. But I guess the idea on the right is that we're supposed to imitate the left, because if we don't imitate the left, then we're going to fall prey to the predations of people like Robert Mueller. I find this a problematic idea that because the left sins, we are therefore also allowed to sin, or therefore our sins are good. So here's Trump going after Jeff Sessions, suggesting Sessions shouldn't have recused himself. Remember, Sessions recused himself in the Russia matter. He did not actually recuse himself in the Michael Cohen matter. So theoretically, he could reestablish his authority here and fire the U.S. District Attorney in the Southern District of New York, for example, or order a stop to that investigation. That's a possibility. But Sessions hasn't said anything so far, and Trump is mad that Sessions recused himself in the Russia investigation, which led to the appointment eventually of Robert Mueller, the special investigator, which led eventually to him referring out to the U.S. SDNY, the Southern District of New York, this Cohen raid. Here's Trump going after Jeff Sessions yesterday.
They find no collusion, and then they go from there and they say, well, let's keep going. And they raid an office of a personal attorney early in the morning. And I think it's a disgrace. So we'll be talking about it more. But this is the most conflicted group of people I've ever seen. The Attorney General made a terrible mistake when he did this and when he recused himself, or he should have certainly let us know if he was going to recuse himself. And we would have put a different Attorney General in. So he made what I consider to be a very terrible mistake for the country.
So obviously Trump is very, very frustrated about all of this. So let's go through some of the facts here and some of the legalities. And then I want to get to what Trump is going to do next year, because this could have some pretty significant ramifications in a couple of different ways. So first of all, attorney-client privilege does not actually apply if you are violating the law with your attorney. As I say, attorney-client privilege is really, really strong. But if I'm Mathis's lawyer and Mathis comes to me and he says, you know what, let's do a drug deal together. Let's go out and buy some cocaine and then let's sell it on the street. This is not covered by attorney-client privilege, because now I am complicit in a crime. This is what we call the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. If I were to claim that our communications were privileged for the purpose of covering up a crime, that does not hold. That privilege simply does not hold. Okay. Also, it is worth noting that the raid on Cohen's office was in fact cleared by a judge as well as the Department of Justice. So for all of the talk, President Trump suggested attorney-client privilege is dead, and he suggested that this was a break-in. He said the FBI broke into Cohen's office. The evidence to support that is just not there, legally speaking. There was a process that was undergone, even if President Trump doesn't like the results of that process.